What happens when a single moment of public humiliation flips your entire life upside down? I never thought that teasing my husband by dancing with my ex would end with a stack of legal documents on our kitchen table. How could one night, meant as a joke, destroy everything I thought I controlled? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Hyacinth Morland, and I'm 32 years old. I work as an office administrator at a small accounting firm downtown, handling paperwork and scheduling meetings for partners who barely acknowledge my existence. Most days, I feel invisible, overlooked, and underappreciated. My husband Eliot teaches middle school science and comes home every evening with stories about his students' latest experiments and discoveries. He's passionate about his work, but sometimes I wonder if he's more excited about teaching photosynthesis than spending time with me. The night everything changed started innocently enough. We were celebrating our friends Jake and Miranda's 10th wedding anniversary at Rossetti's, the local restaurant and bar that hosts most of our social gatherings. The place has that warm neighborhood feel with dim lighting, exposed brick walls, and a small dance floor near the back. Everyone was there, our usual crowd of couples who've known each other since college. I wore my favorite black dress, the one that hugs my curves just right and makes me feel confident. Eliot complimented me when I came downstairs, but it felt automatic, like something he was supposed to say rather than something he actually meant. Throughout dinner, he seemed distracted, checking his phone occasionally and making polite conversation with the other husbands about work and weekend plans. That's when I spotted Damien Siles across the room. Damien was my boyfriend before I met Eliot, back when I was 25 and thought I knew everything about love and relationships. He's a personal trainer at the local gym now, and time has been incredibly kind to him. His shoulders are broader than I remembered, his smile just as charming, and when our eyes met across the crowded restaurant, I felt a familiar flutter in my stomach. "Hyacinth," Damien approached our table with that confident stride I remembered so well. "I can't believe it's been so long. You look absolutely stunning." Eliot shifted uncomfortably beside me, his jaw tightening slightly. "Damien," he acknowledged with a polite nod. "Eliot, good to see you too, man." Damien's tone was friendly, but carried an undertone that made me feel powerful, desired. "Mind if I steal your beautiful wife for one dance, for old time's sake?" I looked at Eliot, waiting for him to object, to show some sign of jealousy or possessiveness. Instead, he just shrugged and took another sip of his beer. "If Hyacinth wants to dance, she can dance." His indifference stung more than I expected. Here was my ex-boyfriend, clearly interested in spending time with me, while my husband acted like he couldn't care less. The other wives at our table were watching with interest, and I could see some of them whispering to their husbands. "I'd love to dance," I said, standing up and smoothing down my dress. Damien led me to the dance floor, his hand warm on the small of my back. The music was slow and romantic, and as we began to move together, I felt more alive than I had in months. Damien pulled me closer than was probably appropriate for a married woman, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I let myself enjoy the feeling of being wanted, of being the center of someone's attention. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered," Damien whispered near my ear, his breath warm against my neck. I laughed, tilting my head back to look at him. "You always were a charmer." "I'm serious, Hyacinth. Marriage suits you." His hand moved slightly lower on my back, and I didn't stop him. "Does he tell you how gorgeous you are every day? Because he should." I glanced over at our table, where Eliot was sitting with his arms crossed, watching us with an unreadable expression. Our 9-year-old daughter Ava was tugging on his sleeve, clearly uncomfortable with the tension she could sense, but couldn't understand. Eliot's mother Sandra was also watching, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. But instead of feeling guilty, I felt vindicated. Finally, someone was paying attention to me. Finally, I was getting the appreciation I deserved. The song ended, but Damien didn't immediately let go of me. "We should catch up properly sometime," he said, his eyes holding mine. "I mean it, Hyacinth. I've thought about you over the years." "I'd like that," I heard myself saying, even though I knew it was dangerous territory. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere had shifted. Eliot was helping Ava with her coloring book, pointedly not looking at me. Sandra excused herself to the bathroom with a sharp glance in my direction. My sister Nadia, who's 29 and still single, grinned at me with approval. "That was hot," she whispered. "Damien looks amazing. I can't believe you dated him." "It was just a dance," I said, but I was smiling. The attention felt intoxicating. Eliot finally looked up at me. "Ready to go home?" His voice was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Already? The party's just getting started. Ava's tired, and I have papers to grade tomorrow." I wanted to argue, to stay and bask in the admiring glances I was getting from other men in the restaurant. But Ava did look sleepy, and I didn't want to cause a scene in front of everyone. During the car ride home, the silence was deafening. Ava fell asleep in her car seat, and Eliot focused intently on the road. I kept replaying the dance in my mind, remembering how good it felt to be desired, to be seen as attractive and worth pursuing. "You seem to enjoy yourself tonight," Eliot said finally as we pulled into our driveway. "It was just a dance, Eliot. Don't make it into something it wasn't." "Right." He turned off the engine and sat quietly for a moment. "Just a dance." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Something had awakened in me tonight, something that had been dormant for too long. As I helped carry a sleeping Ava upstairs to her room, I found myself thinking about Damien's hands on my back, his whispered compliments, the way he made me feel like the most important person in the room. Eliot went straight to his study after we put Ava to bed, claiming he had work to do. I sat alone in our living room, scrolling through social media and seeing photos from the anniversary party already posted by our friends. In several of them, I could see myself dancing with Damien, looking happy and radiant, in a way I hadn't felt in years. What I didn't notice was the small security camera mounted in the corner of Rosetti's dining room, its red recording light blinking steadily as it captured every moment of my dance with my ex-boyfriend. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in months. The memory of Damien's attention still warmed me, and I found myself humming as I made coffee and prepared Ava's breakfast. Eliot had already left for school, leaving only a brief note saying he'd taken care of Ava's lunch and would be home late due to parent-teacher conferences. The first sign that my night of harmless fun might have consequences came around 10 o'clock when my phone started buzzing with text messages. My sister Nadia. "Girl, you're all over Facebook. That dance was everything." My friend Carmen. "Saw the pics from last night. You looked amazing on the dance floor." My coworker Janet. "Is that your ex in the photos from the anniversary party? He's gorgeous." I felt a thrill of excitement mixed with a tiny flutter of anxiety. I'd forgotten how quickly news travels in our small community. I spent my lunch break scrolling through the various posts and comments, noting how many people had liked and shared the photos of me and Damien dancing. But not everyone's reactions were positive. Around 2 in the afternoon, I received a terse text from Sandra, Eliot's mother. "We need to talk. This behavior is unacceptable." I rolled my eyes and deleted the message without responding. Sandra had never particularly liked me, always making subtle comments about how I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She was probably just jealous that I could still attract attention from attractive men at my age. When I got home from work, I found Eliot sitting at the kitchen table, with his laptop open and his phone beside him. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could sense tension in his posture. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light and casual. "Interesting," he replied without looking up from his screen. "I got several text messages from colleagues asking about last night." My stomach tightened slightly. What kind of text messages? The kind where people are concerned about my wife's behavior at a public event. He finally looked at me, his brown eyes serious. Apparently, the photos and videos from the anniversary party are making quite the rounds on social media. Videos? I tried to sound unconcerned, but my voice came out a little higher than usual. Eliot turned his laptop screen toward me. There, playing on repeat, was a video someone had taken of me and Damien dancing. In the harsh light of day, watching it on a computer screen, I could see how intimate our dance looked. Damien's hands were clearly lower on my back than appropriate, and I was pressed against him in a way that looked more like foreplay than friendly dancing. It was just a dance, Eliot, I said, but even to my own ears, the words sounded hollow. Just a dance. He clicked to another tab, showing me the comments under the video. Most were supportive of me, calling me hot and lucky, but there were others that made my cheeks burn with embarrassment. She's married, isn't she? Where's her husband? Poor guy, having to watch his wife grind on her ex like that. This is so inappropriate. What about their kid? Eliot, you're overreacting, I said, closing the laptop. Everyone was having fun. It's not my fault people are gossiping and making something innocent into a big deal. Innocent? He stood up, his calm demeanor finally cracking slightly. Hyacinth, I've known you for 8 years. I've never seen you dance with me the way you danced with Damien last night. That's not true. When was the last time you pressed yourself against me like that? When was the last time you looked at me the way you were looking at him? His questions hit uncomfortably close to home, but I wasn't about to admit that. Instead, I went on the offensive. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, showed more interest in our relationship, I wouldn't need to seek validation elsewhere. Validation? Eliot's voice rose slightly, then he seemed to catch himself and lower it again. Is that what this was about? Validation? I'm 32 years old, Eliot. I work at a job where nobody notices me. I come home to a husband who's more interested in his students than his wife, and I'm supposed to just accept being invisible. You're not invisible to me. Really? When was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you couldn't keep your hands off me? When was the last time you made me feel like the most important person in the room? Eliot was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him processing my words. Finally, he said, I tell you you're beautiful all the time. You say the words, but do you mean them? Or are you just going through the motions because it's what husbands are supposed to do? That's not fair, Hyacinth. Isn't it? Last night, for the first time in months, I felt attractive and desired. I felt like someone actually saw me as a woman, not just as a wife and mother and employee, going through the motions of daily life. Eliot sat back down heavily in his chair. So this is my fault? I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm saying that maybe instead of focusing on what other people think about one dance, we should focus on why I felt the need to dance with someone else in the first place. It was a masterful deflection, and I could see Eliot considering my words. This was how our arguments usually went. I'd turn things around until he was questioning himself instead of me. It was a skill I'd perfected over the years, and it usually worked. But something was different this time. Instead of apologizing or promising to pay more attention to me, Eliot just nodded slowly. You're right, he said quietly. We should definitely focus on that. There was something in his tone that made me uneasy, but before I could analyze it further, Ava came bounding into the kitchen, full of energy and stories from her day at school. The conversation was effectively over, and Eliot shifted seamlessly into dad mode, giving our daughter his full attention. That evening, after Ava was in bed, I tried to restart our conversation, hoping to smooth things over completely. But Eliot said he had papers to grade and disappeared into his study, leaving me alone in the living room with my thoughts and my phone. I found myself scrolling through Damien's social media profiles, looking at photos of him at the gym, at various social events, living what looked like an exciting and fulfilling life. On impulse, I sent him a friend request and a brief message. Great seeing you last night. We should definitely catch up soon. He responded within minutes. I was hoping you'd reach out. How about coffee this week? As I typed my response, agreeing to meet him Thursday afternoon, I told myself it was perfectly innocent. I was just reconnecting with an old friend. There was nothing wrong with having coffee and conversation with someone who appreciated my company. But even as I rationalized my actions, I knew I was crossing a line. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered what Eliot was really doing in his study and why he'd seemed so calm about everything. What I didn't know was that he was methodically going through our phone records, printing out screenshots of social media posts, and saving every piece of evidence that documented my behavior. My husband, it turned out, was much more observant than I'd given him credit for. Thursday afternoon couldn't come fast enough. I spent extra time getting ready for my coffee date with Damien, choosing a fitted blue dress that brought out my eyes and taking care with my makeup. I told myself I was just making an effort to look nice for an old friend, but the flutter of excitement in my stomach suggested otherwise. We met at Café Luna, a cozy spot downtown that I'd never been to with Eliot. Damien was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw me, his smile warm and appreciative. "You look incredible," he said, pulling out my chair for me. "I ordered you a vanilla latte. I remember it was your favorite." The fact that he remembered such a small detail from our relationship years ago made my heart skip. When was the last time Eliot had remembered my coffee preference without asking? "Thank you," I said, settling into my seat. "This place is lovely. I've never been here before. It's one of my favorites. Quiet, intimate, good for conversation." His eyes held mine across the small table. "I have to say, Hyacinth, seeing you the other night brought back a lot of memories. Good memories, I hope. The best." He reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. I've often wondered what would have happened if we hadn't broken up, if I hadn't been so focused on my career back then. The touch of his fingers on mine sent a familiar warmth through me. We were different people then, young, figuring things out. Maybe, but some things don't change. The way I felt about you, the connection we had, that's still there, isn't it? I knew I should pull my hand away, should redirect the conversation to safer topics. Instead, I found myself leaning forward slightly. I felt it too the other night, when we were dancing. I could tell. You were always easy to read, at least for me. His thumb traced across my knuckles. "Are you happy, Hyacinth? Really happy?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. That's complicated. Marriage often is, I imagine. I've managed to avoid it so far. He grinned, though I came close a few times. No Mrs. Damien Siles yet. His expression shifted slightly. Actually, there is someone. Brianne. We got married last year. I felt a stab of something. Disappointment. Jealousy. "Oh, congratulations." "Thanks. She's great, really, but..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Sometimes you meet someone who reminds you of what passion really feels like. What it's like to want someone so much you can't think straight. The implication in his words was clear, and I felt my cheeks flush. "Damien, I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to do, Hyacinth. I just want you to know that if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who sees you for who you really are, I'm here." We talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between memories of our past and subtle flirtation about the present. When it was time to leave, Damien walked me to my car. "This was wonderful," I said, meaning it. "I'd forgotten how easy it is to talk to you." "Same time next week?" he asked, standing closer to me than was strictly appropriate in the parking lot of a public cafe. "I'd like that." He leaned down and kissed my cheek, but his lips lingered a moment too long, and I could feel his breath warm against my ear. "Until next week, then." I drove home feeling more alive than I had in months, my skin still tingling where he'd kissed me. It wasn't until I was pulling into my driveway that the guilt started to creep in. I was a married woman, having coffee with another married man, and the attraction between us was undeniable. But I pushed the guilt aside. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just having coffee with a friend. If Eliot paid more attention to me, if he made me feel as desired and appreciated as Damien did, I wouldn't need to seek that feeling elsewhere. That evening, Eliot was unusually quiet during dinner. He helped Ava with her homework and read her a bedtime story, but I could sense a distance between us that hadn't been there before our argument. When I tried to engage him in conversation about his day, his responses were polite but brief. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked, as we were cleaning up the kitchen. "Everything's fine," he said, loading dishes into the dishwasher with methodical precision. "You seem distant." "Just thinking about some things." He closed the dishwasher and turned to face me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our conversation the other day." "About what?" "About us. About what you said regarding feeling invisible and unappreciated." I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe my words had gotten through to him. Maybe he was going to make more of an effort. "And I think you're right that we need to focus on our relationship, but I also think we need to be honest about what we both want and expect." "What do you mean?" Eliot was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "I mean that if you need things I can't or won't provide, we should probably discuss what that means for our marriage." His calm, measured tone unsettled me. This wasn't the reaction I'd expected. "Eliot, I don't want anything from anyone else. I just want my husband to see me, to appreciate me." "I do see you, Hyacinth. I see you more clearly than you might think." There was something in his voice that made me look at him more closely. His expression was still calm, but there was a steeliness in his eyes that I wasn't used to seeing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that I'm not blind to what's happening, and I'm not going to pretend that everything is fine when it clearly isn't." Before I could respond, he headed toward his study. "I have some work to finish up. We can continue this conversation later." I stood alone in the kitchen, feeling unsettled by the exchange. Eliot's reaction wasn't what I'd anticipated. Usually, when we had these discussions, he'd either get defensive or apologetic. This calm, analytical approach was new, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Eliot was polite and functional. He helped with Ava, did his share of household tasks, and maintained pleasant conversation. But there was an emotional distance that I couldn't bridge. Meanwhile, Damien and I had begun texting regularly, innocent messages that gradually became more flirtatious. "Thinking about our conversation yesterday," he texted one evening, while I was watching TV alone, Eliot once again in his study. "Which part?" I responded. "The part where you laughed at my terrible joke about the gym equipment. You have the most beautiful laugh." "You're just saying that." "I never just say anything, Hyacinth. I mean every word." These exchanges became the highlight of my days. Damien made me feel witty and attractive, and desired in a way I'd forgotten was possible. When he suggested we meet for coffee again the following Thursday, I agreed without hesitation. Our second coffee date was even more charged than the first. Damien was more direct in his compliments, more obvious in his attraction. When he suggested we take a walk in the park after coffee, I said yes, even though I knew it was dangerous territory. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said as we walked along the tree-lined path. "I know it's complicated, but I had to tell you. Damien, we're both married." "I know, but that doesn't change how I feel." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Does it change how you feel?" I knew I should say yes, should end this before it went any further. Instead, I found myself stepping closer to him. "No, it doesn't." He reached up and touched my face gently. "You deserve to be cherished, Hyacinth. You deserve to feel beautiful and wanted every single day." When he kissed me, soft and tentative at first, then with growing passion when I didn't pull away, I felt like I was coming alive after being asleep for years. It was wrong, I knew it was wrong, but it felt so right that I couldn't bring myself to stop. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and shaking. I should go. I know, but I'm glad this happened. So am I whispered and meant it. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling from his kiss. I told myself it was just one kiss, that it didn't mean anything, that I could control this situation. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. What I didn't know was that Eliot had been tracking my location through our shared phone plan, and that he'd already begun consulting with a family law attorney about his options. The evidence was mounting, and my husband was more prepared than I could have possibly imagined. The kiss with Damien changed everything, though I tried to pretend it hadn't. Over the next week, our text messages became more frequent and increasingly intimate. We talked about our marriages, our disappointments, our desires. Damien made me feel understood in a way I hadn't felt in years. "My wife doesn't understand me the way you do," he texted one afternoon while I was at work. "What do you mean?" "She's focused on practical things, the house, her job, planning for the future. She doesn't see the passionate side of me, the side that needs excitement, adventure." "I understand that feeling," I replied, thinking of Eliot's methodical approach to life, his contentment with routine. "I know you do. That's what makes you so special, Hyacinth. You get it." These conversations made me feel validated, like I wasn't crazy for wanting more excitement in my life. When Damien suggested we meet again, this time for lunch at a restaurant across town, where we were less likely to run into anyone we knew, I agreed. But our secret was harder to keep than I'd anticipated. The following Saturday, we were invited to dinner at Sandra's house, a monthly tradition that I usually dreaded but couldn't avoid without causing suspicion. Sandra had never warmed to me, always making subtle comments about my job, my parenting, or my appearance that left me feeling inadequate. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a conservative dress and minimal makeup, trying to project the image of the perfect wife and mother. But I felt like I was wearing a costume, playing a role that no longer fit. The dinner started uncomfortably and only got worse. Sandra was even colder than usual, barely acknowledging my presence and directing all her conversation toward Eliot and Ava. When I tried to contribute to the discussion about Ava's school performance, Sandra cut me off. "I think Eliot has that handled," she said dismissively. My father Martin was also there, having driven up from his retirement community an hour away. He kept giving me concerned looks, as if he could sense the tension but couldn't quite identify its source. "Everything okay with you two?" he asked quietly when we were alone in the kitchen, helping to clear dishes. "Everything's fine, Dad. Why?" "You seem distant, both of you, and Sandra's been making comments." "What kind of comments?" Martin looked uncomfortable. "About your behavior at that anniversary party. She showed me some photos on her computer." My stomach dropped. "Dad, it was just dancing. People are making it into something it wasn't." "I'm sure you're right, sweetheart, but maybe be a little more careful about appearances. For Ava's sake, if nothing else." His gentle concern made me feel worse than Sandra's open hostility. My father had always been supportive of me, always given me the benefit of the doubt, if even he was worried. The evening took a turn for the worse when we were having coffee in Sandra's living room. I excused myself to use the bathroom and was surprised to find a woman waiting for me when I came out. She was about my age, with short brown hair and a serious expression. "You're Hyacinth Morland," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "I'm Brienne Siles, Damien's wife." My blood turned to ice. "Oh, hi. We need to talk." Her voice was calm, but I could see anger flickering in her eyes. "I'm not sure what about." "About my husband, about the coffee dates, about the text messages." I felt the world tilt slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, I've seen his phone. I know about the messages, the meetings, all of it." She stepped closer, and I could see she was trembling slightly with controlled rage. "I know about the kiss in the park." Brianne, I can explain. No, you can't. There's no explanation that makes this okay. You're a married woman with a child, and you're having an affair with my husband. It's not an affair. We're just friends. Friends don't kiss in public parks. Friends don't send messages about how much they miss each other's touch. I felt sick. How much did she know? How much evidence did she have? What do you want? I asked quietly. I want you to stop. Completely. No more messages, no more meetings, no more anything. If you don't, I'll make sure your husband knows exactly what you've been doing. You don't understand. My marriage is complicated. I don't care about your marriage, I care about mine. Stay away from Damien, or I'll destroy your life the same way you've been trying to destroy mine. She walked away, leaving me shaking in Sandra's hallway. I composed myself as best I could and returned to the living room, but I could barely focus on the conversation. Every few minutes, I caught Sandra watching me with a knowing look, and I wondered if she'd overheard the confrontation. When we finally left Sandra's house, the car ride home was tense. Ava chatted about her day with her grandmother, but I could feel Eliot's eyes on me in the rearview mirror. You were quiet tonight, he said after we'd put Ava to bed. I had a headache. Anything else bothering you? I looked at him sharply. Like what? I don't know. You seemed upset, like something had happened. Nothing happened. I just don't enjoy spending time with your mother. You know that. Eliot nodded, but I could see he wasn't entirely convinced. My mom can be difficult, but she cares about our family. Does she? Because she treats me like I'm some kind of threat. Maybe she has reason to be concerned. His words hit me like a slap. What's that supposed to mean? It means that people talk, Hyacinth, and when people talk, it affects everyone in the family, including Ava. People need to mind their own business. Maybe, or maybe people who are married need to act like it. The accusation hung in the air between us. I wanted to deny it, to get angry, to turn this around on him the way I usually did, but Brianne's confrontation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. I'm going to bed, I said instead. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in my mind. Brianne's threat echoed in my head, but so did Damien's words about passion and excitement and being understood. I was trapped between my desire for something more and the growing consequences of pursuing it. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I hoped it was Damien, but it was from my sister Nadia. Dad called me. He's worried about you. What's going on? I stared at the message for a long time before turning off my phone without responding. I was in too deep to explain, but not ready to stop. Not yet. What I didn't realize was that Eliot was lying awake beside me, very much aware of my restlessness and already planning his next move. The evidence file he'd been building was nearly complete, and he was ready to take action. The confrontation with Brianne should have been a wake-up call, but instead, it only made me more determined to hold on to what I'd found with Damien. Over the next few days, I convinced myself that she was just a jealous wife trying to control her husband, that she didn't understand the special connection Damien and I shared. When Damien texted me the day after the dinner at Sandra's, I was ready with my response. My wife confronted me last night. His message read, she knows about us. Mine too. Well, sort of. I think he suspects something. What do we do? I stared at the question for a long time. The smart thing would be to end it, to go back to my marriage and try to make it work. But the thought of returning to my invisible life, of pretending to be satisfied with Eliot's distracted affection, made me feel suffocated. We be more careful, I typed back. Are you sure? This is getting complicated. I'm sure. What we have is worth fighting for. It was a lie, of course. What we had was a few coffee dates, some flirtatious text messages, and one kiss. But it represented something larger to me, the possibility of being truly seen and desired, of being someone's priority instead of an afterthought. Damien seemed relieved by my response. You're amazing, Hyacinth. I don't know what I'd do if I lost you now. His words made me feel powerful, important. This was what I'd been missing in my marriage, the sense that I mattered, that someone's happiness depended on me. But maintaining the illusion was becoming more difficult. Eliot's behavior had shifted in ways that made me increasingly uncomfortable. He was still polite, still functional as a husband and father, but there was a watchfulness about him that hadn't been there before. I started noticing small things, the way he would glance at my phone when it buzzed with messages, how he'd ask casual questions about my day that felt more like interrogations. The fact that he'd started coming home at different times, as if he was trying to catch me off guard. One evening, I found him in our home office, surrounded by papers and folders I didn't recognize. "What are you working on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Just organizing some documents," he replied without looking up. "What kind of documents?" "Financial records, insurance papers, that sort of thing." He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "It's important to keep everything in order." Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. "Since when are you interested in organizing paperwork?" "Since I realized how much I don't know about our situation, it's good to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" "For whatever comes next." His cryptic answers were frustrating, but I didn't want to push too hard and seem suspicious. Instead, I retreated to the living room and tried to focus on a book, though I found myself reading the same paragraph over and over. My phone buzzed with a message from Damien. "Missing you. When can we see each other again?" I glanced toward the office, where I could hear Eliot shuffling papers. "Soon. I'll figure something out." "I have an idea. There's a conference I'm attending next weekend in the city. Maybe you could find a reason to be there too." The suggestion was tempting, a whole weekend away from Eliot's watchful eyes, from the growing tension in our house, from the constant feeling that I was walking on eggshells. "I'll think about it," I replied, but even as I typed the words, I knew I was going to say yes. I needed this escape, needed to feel alive again, needed to be with someone who made me feel like the center of the universe. The next morning, I announced to Eliot that I was thinking of visiting my college friend Rebecca in the city for the weekend. "Rebecca?" He looked up from his coffee with interest. "I don't think you've mentioned her in years." "We've been reconnecting through social media. She's going through a divorce and could use some support." It was a plausible lie, built on just enough truth to be believable. Rebecca was going through a divorce, though we hadn't spoken in months. "That's thoughtful of you," Eliot said. "When were you thinking of going?" "Next weekend, if that works with your schedule." "I can handle things here. It might be good for you to get away for a bit." His easy agreement surprised me. Usually, he'd ask more questions or express concern about leaving him alone with Ava for a whole weekend. "Really? You don't mind?" "Not at all. You've seemed stressed lately. A change of scenery might help." I felt a flash of guilt at his understanding response, but I pushed it aside. This was exactly what I needed, his permission to pursue what I really wanted. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation and planning. Damien and I exchanged increasingly excited messages about our upcoming weekend together. He'd booked a room at a nice hotel, and we'd have 2 whole days to explore whatever was happening between us. But as the weekend approached, I started noticing more changes in Eliot's behavior. He seemed almost relieved about my upcoming trip. He was more attentive to Ava, making special plans for their father-daughter weekend. He even seemed more relaxed, as if some burden had been lifted from his shoulders. On Friday morning, as I was packing my overnight bag, he appeared in the bedroom doorway. "Have a good trip," he said, his tone warm but somehow final. "I will. Take care of Ava." "Of course, she's my priority." There was something in the way he said it that made me look at him more closely. "Eliot, is everything okay? You seem different." "Do I? I feel more like myself than I have in a while, actually." "What does that mean?" He was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his words. "It means I'm done pretending things are okay when they're not. I'm done accepting behavior that I wouldn't accept from anyone else just because we're married. I don't understand. I think you do, Hyacinth. I think you understand exactly what I mean. Before I could respond, Ava came running into the room, excited about her weekend plans with Daddy. The conversation was cut short, but Eliot's words stayed with me as I drove toward the city. What I didn't know was that as soon as my car disappeared around the corner, Eliot made a phone call to his attorney, confirming that everything was ready for Monday morning. The private investigator he'd hired had already delivered the photos from my park meeting with Damien. The phone records were compiled and organized. The evidence file was complete. My husband, it turned out, had been preparing for this moment for weeks, and I was walking straight into the trap I'd set for myself. The weekend with Damien was everything I'd imagined it would be. We stayed at a beautiful hotel downtown, had romantic dinners, and spent hours talking about our dreams and desires. For 2 days, I felt like the woman I used to be, confident, attractive, and completely alive. But reality came crashing back the moment I walked through my front door Sunday evening. The house was unusually quiet. I found Eliot and Ava in the living room, playing a board game. Ava ran to hug me, chattering excitedly about her weekend adventures with Daddy, but Eliot barely looked up. "How is Rebecca?" he asked, his tone neutral. "Good. The divorce is hard on her, but she's managing. I'm sure she is. People are stronger than they think when they have to be." Again, there was something in his tone that made me uneasy, but Ava's presence prevented any deeper conversation. That night, after Ava was in bed, I tried to engage Eliot in conversation about our weekends, but he was distracted and distant. He went to bed early, claiming he had a big day ahead of him at school. Monday morning started normally enough. Eliot made breakfast, helped Ava get ready for school, and left for work with his usual kiss on my cheek. But something felt different, charged with an energy I couldn't identify. I was at work when the first sign of trouble appeared. Around 10 o'clock, I received a text from Nadia. "Dad's trying to reach you, says it's urgent." My stomach clenched with worry. I called my father immediately. "Hyacinth, sweetheart." His voice was strained. "I need you to come home, right now." "What's wrong? Is it your health?" "No, it's not my health. Just, please come home. There are some people here who need to speak with you." "What people?" "Just come home, Hyacinth, please." I left work immediately, my mind racing with possibilities. Had something happened to Eliot? To Ava? The 20-minute drive felt like hours. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw several cars I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see figures moving around inside my house. I walked through my front door to find my worst nightmare waiting for me. The kitchen felt like a crime scene. Eliot sat at the head of the table, hands folded, eyes steady. Jennifer Walsh, divorce attorney extraordinaire, had the briefcase open like a surgeon's tray. My father hovered by the window, arms crossed tight, looking 20 years older. Then I saw the photographs. Me and Damien outside Café Luna, laughing too close. Me and Damien in Riverside Park, his hand on my waist, my mouth on mine. Hotel keycard logs, screenshots of texts that made my stomach flip. Eliot didn't raise his voice. He never does when he's furious. That's how I should have known this was lethal. "Divorce papers were filed this morning, Hyacinth. You've been served." He slid the petition across the table like he was passing the salt. "Primary custody to him. Supervised visitation for me until I demonstrate stability. The house stays with him and Ava. My settlement, 1 year of minimal support and half my 401k. Nothing more." Jennifer Walsh added almost kindly, "Mrs. Siles filed an hour ago. You're named as co-respondent. Alienation of affection carries weight in this state." My father finally spoke, voice cracking. "Hi, how could you do this to Ava?" I had no answer that didn't sound pathetic. Eliot stood. "I'll be at my mother's with Ava tonight. You can call tomorrow to schedule a visit. Here, not at Damien's apartment. I'll have someone come for the rest of her things this week. Eliot, please. No. Quiet, final. You wanted to feel alive. Congratulations. Now live with it. He paused at the door. One more thing. I changed the locks this afternoon. Your bags are in the guest room. You have until 6 to take what you need. The click of the front door closing was softer than a gunshot, but it felt louder. 3 hours later, I sat in a borrowed conference room downtown, mascara smeared, telling a shark in a cheaper suit that, yes, the affair was real. Yes, I'd lied for weeks. Yes, I'd been reckless and selfish, and now I was terrified of losing my daughter. The new lawyer flipped through Eliot's evidence and gave me the look that said, "Lady, you're radioactive." "Best case," she said, "we keep joint custody and limit the financial bleeding. Worst case, you're looking at every other weekend and a very public character assassination." I stared at the petition again. Hyacinth Grace Morland versus Eliot James, Morland irretrievable breakdown, at-fault grounds, adultery. My own name looked foreign, like it belonged to someone who deserved this. I thought of Ava's face when Eliot explains why Mommy doesn't live here anymore. I thought of Damien's last text. Had fun, talk soon. I thought of the way Eliot I met 12 years ago, the one who said forever, like it was easy. Turns out forever has conditions. And I broke every single one. The lawyer closed the file. "We can fight, Mrs. Morland. But first, you need to decide what you're actually fighting for. Your daughter, your pride, or the life you threw away." I looked out her window at the city lights blinking on, cold and indifferent. "I don't know yet," I whispered. But for the first time in months, I was telling the truth.